On Wednesday, Republican Party leaders in the House of Representatives presented draft aid bills for Ukraine, among other countries. It involves $61 billion in support. The vote is expected to take place tomorrow.
What we'll do is bring to the House floor independent measures. We won't be voting on the Senate supplemental in its current form, but we will vote on each of these measures separately in 4 different pieces. We will vote on the Israel aid, on the aid to Ukraine, on the aid to the Indo-Pacific, and then another measure that has our national security priorities included, and that has some of the things with regard to the loan lease option and the Repo Act and some other sanctions on Iran and other measures that we've been talking about here for quite some time.
Earlier in the day, Mike Johnson was skeptical of further funding for Ukraine because of the fight to change migration laws in the United States. The speaker is working strongly with Donald Trump, who just met with Polish President Andrzej Duda. The politicians discussed support for Ukraine. I said, today it's easier to give money because Ukrainians want to defend themselves. They have the will to defend their homeland, which means we will give them money at the moment, equipment, so that they have a way to face Russian aggression. Then in the future, when it turns out that Russian imperialism, as we unfortunately fear, will spill over more and more into Europe. Because if Putin conquers Ukraine, Poland could be next. Maybe it's better for the U.S. taxpayer to sacrifice just a few dollars today to help the defenders of Ukraine. And that's the same position the Polish president presented a month ago to U.S. Speaker Mike Johnson, who has now changed his mind. The Polish president's influence on American politics is being recognized by foreign media, like Politico. Their dinner meeting at Trump Tower lasted more than 2 hours, according to Trump's people. They discussed the war between Russia and Ukraine. I think he later analyzed it for himself, those aspects of our conversation. He just had topics from me directly, from a man who lives in that part of the world, who directly lives in a country bordering Ukraine, which is defending itself against Russian aggression. President Duda stressed that Poland's security is a strong North Atlantic alliance and strong support from the United States, hence the talks with both Biden and Trump, as one of these politicians will be elected U.S. president in November. Trump behaves differently as a candidate. He will certainly behave and make decisions differently as president. He is a key figure for us, so we can't alienate a possible U.S. president right now, which I think is a mistake, playing only to one goal, playing only to one side, which is what the current prime minister in Poland is doing. Due to the fact that Tusk is not hiding his dislike of Trump. I personally would not recommend such a meeting with Trump because it somehow may affect the election campaign in the States, but the president makes the decisions. Instead of the United States, Tusk prefers to bet on Germany, starting with the Germans. Here you can see 2 visions of conducting foreign policy. President Duda's pro-American foreign policy and Prime Minister Tusk's pro-German foreign policy. Tusk's approach to our country's subjectivity towards our Western neighbor is also questionable. These words of Bartłomiej Sienkiewicz in 2018 are still quite shocking. In my opinion, we are a peripheral country. This is often not talked about because it is not something to be proud of either, but all 4 Central European countries function as elements of Germany's internal economy. Poland under Donald Tusk, unfortunately, will be going towards Berlin on its knees, and if these very dangerous regulations for the creation of an EU army are introduced, which will blow the North Atlantic Pact apart from the inside, whose task is to push the United States out of Europe, then we can be sure that we will actually become a country that will not be safe, because it will have no way to defend itself, and we will only be dependent on Berlin. And this could make it easier for Putin to carry out his imperialist plans. Adrian Borecki, TV Republika. The missile hit a 5-story residential building. The upper floor is partially destroyed. A fire has broken out. The number of casualties and injured will be updated as the search and rescue operation progresses. I woke up after the explosion. I saw that there was smoke in the yard. Something was burning. I went outside. The neighbors helped clean up the debris and open the door of our apartment building. My wife and daughter are shocked. They say they won't return to the apartment and asked me to evacuate them somewhere because they won't be able to live here anymore. I haven't seen anything like this before. Meanwhile, President Volodymyr Zelensky visited soldiers fighting on the front line in the Donetsk region in eastern Ukraine. I thank you for your sacrifice to save the lives of our soldiers from the very beginning of the war. I don't want to be too pathetic because you know your achievements very well. Thank you for your service to Ukraine. I wish you victory and good health. 25 months have passed since the full-scale invasion of Ukraine began. The past weeks have seen minor but nonetheless territorial gains by the Russians. Kiev is constantly appealing to the West for help because their ammunition is almost at the end of its life, and Russian troops are preparing an offensive that will begin in late spring or summer. The electoral race for mayor in some Polish cities is still ongoing. On Wednesday, a debate was held between candidates for mayor of Elbląg, Andrzej Śliwka of Law and Justice, and Michał Misan of the Civic Platform, during which the politicians answered questions from residents. One of the questions concerned migration policy. Civic Platform candidate announces openness and declares that if he takes over as mayor, Elbląg will accommodate migrants. Migration policy is a state policy. I will remind you that when the war broke out, all Ukrainians who applied to Elbląg, we helped all of them. We will act similarly in this case. If there are people who need help, then as a mayor, my empathy will not allow me to not help them. Other politicians from Donald Tusk's party think similarly to Michał Misan. If we need to take in a few thousand migrants, we should certainly do so. We are a strong and rich enough country that we should do it. If we are in the European Union, we should adopt the mechanisms that prevail in the European Union, including the solidarity mechanism. If we don't want to accept migrants, we have to pay compensation. The announcements by Civic Platform MPs seem to be somewhat at odds with the current declarations by Prime Minister Donald Tusk. Poland will not accept illegal migrants under any such mechanism. Such words from the Prime Minister's mouth may come as a surprise to some, since 7 years ago, as then head of the European Council, he criticized Law and Justice's migration policy and called on EU leaders to show solidarity. I call on all leaders of European countries to once again step up their actions when it comes to solidarity with countries facing an unprecedented wave of migration. I call for accepting more refugees. This is not the only one, but it is an important gesture of solidarity. A fair distribution of at least 100,000 refugees distributed among the countries of the European Union is what we actually need to do today. 2 years ago, during the hybrid attack on the Polish-Belarusian border, he said this about illegal migrants. These are poor people who are looking for their place on earth, and there is no need to make grim, disgusting propaganda targeting migrants, because these are people who need help. What is the reason for Donald Tusk's volatility, and what do politicians from other parties think about taking in migrants in the name of mandatory solidarity? However, the majority of Poles do not want this legal migration. As a result, Prime Minister Donald Tusk is changing his mind in front of the public. After all, in 2015, it was under the inspiration of Prime Minister Tusk, who was the head of the European Council at the time, that this first consent was expressed by Prime Minister Ewa Kopacz. I don't imagine such a situation that we should accept refugees from other countries, because we are a border country of the European Union and we are under migratory pressure all the time. So this is our task, and we can't accept problems from other countries because we support the European Union in this regard and fight to protect this border, which is in the east. The topic of the compulsory, solidarity-based admission of migrants, including illegal ones, by all European Union countries has returned turned to politics and the media in connection with the pact adopted at the European Parliament meeting. Growing discontent across Europe and social tensions seem to be ignored by Brussels. The question is whether it will also be ignored that in Poland we now have more than 1 million refugees from Ukraine, and will we also have to take in migrants? Natalia Rzeźniczak, TV Republika. Israel launched a limited retaliatory attack against military targets in Iran this morning. This was in response to last weekend's massive Iranian attack. Media in Tehran reported that 3 drones were shot down over the city of Isfahan in the central part of the country. There are many indications that Iran will not launch a counterstrike. Today's events may suggest a successful outcome of diplomatic efforts by countries concerned with events in the Middle East.
Iranian state media has seemed to downplay the attack, saying that a number of small drones have been intercepted by Iranian air defense over Isfahan. That seems to indicate that Iran is seeking to step down off the ledge, minimize the impact of the attack. There are a host of targets Israel could have hit in Iran in the vicinity of Isfahan, to include some nuclear research laboratories. The Natanz nuclear facility is nearby, as well as production facilities for drones and other advanced ballistic missile capabilities.
Reliable sources emphasized that all nuclear facilities and military centers in Isfahan and all parts of the country are in complete security, and no incident has occurred for these facilities and centers. Currently, there are no restrictions on domestic and international flights at the country's airports. Iranian media and officials described a small number of explosions, which they said resulted from Iran's air defenses hitting 3 drones over the city of Isfahan. Iranian state broadcaster aired images of what they said was flashes in the sky over Isfahan. No, I haven't heard the news since this morning. Come on, that's not important. Attacking Isfahan? That is ridiculous. Meanwhile, in a social media post, the International Atomic Energy Agency said there is no damage to Iran's nuclear sites and called for extreme restraint when reporting on such important issues.